How's it going, YouTube? Coming today with another video, and today, guys, what to bring to you is the new post-Dabl Dragon Link deck. I'm here with Trishula. Introduce yourself.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Mike Thomas, aka the Young Trishula. I am kind of the resident Dragon Link bozo of YouTube and Twitch. I've been playing this deck pretty much since its inception, more or less nonstop for like 3 or 4 years now. So I, I've done well with it, I think.
I think you've done a great job with this deck, yeah, and it's one of those things where a lot of people, when they think Dragon Link, Trishula is definitely a household name. So, you've done great with the deck, and I'm very excited to hear your insight post-Dabl.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I'm happy to, share my thoughts on the deck.
Absolutely. And if you haven't already checked out Trishula, definitely go ahead and follow him over on YouTube, Twitch, and then also if you need a coaching session over Medify, Trishula's also a coach over there. Go check him out as well. All right, so moving into our first topic here, I really want to talk about the Bystial cards. These are brand new out of Dabl. These cards are very strong, especially the new spell and trap. How do you feel like these cards are really affecting the deck now?
Honestly, I think these cards are the deck now. To be perfectly honest, they're just so powerful. They cover so many of the deck spaces, and it does just about everything that you want it to do for Dragon Link. Dragon Link lost some of its very powerful tools over the past few years. We've lost cards like LP. We've lost cards like our multiple copies of Striker Dragon. We lost recently Halki Fibrax and our Chaotic Magical. But these cards kind of slowly kind of piece together bits and pieces of what we lost and kind of get you back to a semblance of what the deck was, in previous formats.
I think that's really funny when we just kind of see history repeat itself. Now we're seeing number 38 back in the deck as well. And then we also see different effects that we already know are very good in the deck, like the second effect of the Chaos Space, and now we get that within Rebranded. I feel like this card is just definitely revolutionary for the deck as well, just being able to recycle double in one turn, especially if you do open up that Chaos Space, getting back that Striker Dragon a lot more efficiently, and then even if you don't open up the Chaos Space, being able to loot those baby dragons is also very strong. So moving a little further on here with the Adventurer cards, this is something that I saw a lot of people not really going after, and I still thought they would be pretty good in the deck just because of the levels alone. I think that it's really nice. Of course, you can get the token that's a level 4, and then the Griffin that's a level 7. Works pretty well with the Rocket Synchron and the Rocket Tracer. How do we feel about this package still being played in the deck?
So I think it's kind of interesting. I think you can take this deck in a couple of approaches. I think the adventure version of Dragon Link is still viable, which is something that I haven't really talked too much about on my channels or anything yet. I do have a couple videos planned for that coming up soon, but you can still make the full power end board. I think I posted a picture on Twitter earlier today, actually, of the full end board being Seals, IP, Baron, Savage, the branded beast, rebranded, and like 4 cards in hand. You can still do that in Dragon
Crazy.
Link. Yeah, it's really crazy what this deck can accomplish, and I think that's only like a 2 or 3 card combo. Um, so you can still do a lot, but I think the version that's probably going to see more play, the one that's going to be more popular, is probably returning kind of to Dragon's roots and playing a pure version of the deck, just because you're able to fit in so many more defensive cards in that version of the deck and keep it more consistent at like 40 cards rather than like 50.
Yeah, if we start looking more toward like the normal summons, I feel like it almost depends on like what kind of variant you're playing versus the black metal or the safer. I do like both these cards, though. I know that a lot of people were hinting at Droll for this format too. And I know that every single time that we heard about Droll for the format, a lot of people switched to like black metal because you get to guarantee a lot more searches right away versus going for like the safer play. So it really does depend either way. But which one do you feel like is the better normal summon at the moment?
It's so funny that you mentioned the Droll, because I always tell people about this when I talk about Dragon Link, is that there's always 2 builds of Dragon Link in every format. There is the regular version that plays safer, and then there's the anti-Droll version that plays black metal, and you usually only play the black metal as a way to counter Droll and Lockbird. So with a lot of people considering Droll in this format, black metal is definitely something I've been trying out. I think if you're playing the 40 card version though, the more, the more concise standard version, I think Seyfert is still a little bit better, especially because Seyfert got a huge boost with the Bystial cards
Yep.
in that you have a new level 8 target to add back to your hand. And one of the really cool interactions that you have in this deck is because Lubellion, which is your Rhoda for all of your Bystials, is a level 8, you can use that Lubellion to, search something like a Magnamut, use your Seyfert to, just adjacently combo and start your plays. And then later on, you can use that Seyfert to get back your Lubellion and give yourself the ability to search more cards, on your next turn and just keep that engine going so that you're always summoning a Magnamut, always getting a search at the end of your turn.
Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy too that search at the end of the turn just turns into Levianeer, and then everyone's like, "Oh, like that's a problem." Um,
Yep.
Card's still pretty good. Card's still pretty insane.
Yeah.
One card that I don't have on here right now, but one still very good card that I have a question about would be Brotar. How do we feel about that right now?
Brotar, I think, is similar with how you were just saying with the Magnamut, how it can turn into your Levianeer. That's really what Brotar was played for a long time, was that you would summon off your Hieratic Seals to search Levianeer as your follow-up play. And I think Magnamut just strictly replaces it now. Brotar's been has fallen out of favor in the last few years in Dragons, just because it wasn't very proactive. But now Magnamut is just a strictly better version, that it is both proactive, that you can, special summon it on your turn as an extender. You can use it as a defensive card against decks like Terralament, and you can summon it off your Hieratic Seals in order to search follow-up. So I think it just strictly replaces Brotar in every version of the deck.
Yeah, I know that Brotar was really good back when like DPE was really strong because there were so many like pop effects, right? So that was
Yeah.
definitely a cool one that we could run. But I understand the Magnuma is just like it's so good, right? Like it's just one of those things that's able to search any dragon from deck or graveyard, which is kind of nuts. And it's one thing that I could definitely see being one of the most powerful things that we have for the deck at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. Magnamut is probably the second best card in your deck, if not the best card in your deck.
What would you say is the second or first?
I mean, Seyfert is probably still the best card in your deck. That or Chaos Space. Those are kind of the heart and soul of the Dragon deck. But
Safer
you
pitch
know,
abs.
yeah, there you go. The best 2 card combination in the entire deck. Uh,
Pretty good.
which some people say that it's Chaos Space plus Absorauter is the best 2 card combination, but I'll still hold that it is Seyfert plus Absorauter, because then you can still use your Chaos Space for other things.
Yeah, pitching abs and searching Nocto is kind of nuts. So like, I'll stick with that.
Yeah, getting the free Nocto draw is really really nice.
So with a deck like this now and how things have been, what would you say the more typical end board is going to be?
Well, I think it depends on the version that you're gonna play. The adventure version, as I mentioned before, can make those really crazy end boards, whereas the more pure version has kind of a range of the end boards that you can make. The pure version ends from anything from Seal's Pass, Seal's Savage Pass, to like Seal's Borderland Savage. And I think it really depends on a few factors: how much you want to respect cards like Nibiru, as well as how you draw. So if I was to play the pure version of Dragon Link, which I think is going to be the more popular version, going into an event like YCS Minneapolis, I think that there is an argument to end on either, a large board with like Borland and like a Savage Dragon and maybe a Seals on top of that, or to just conserve your cards and just go Seals Pass.
Yeah, Seal's Pass has always been really strong for the deck as well. That bounce effect's pretty crazy, especially if you're playing on Sprite and they do the normal summon, then you bounce it and you're like starter or bust. So it's also just a really cool one there. Depending, because we do see a lot more people switching off of like the Diva or even like the Nimble engine and switching more to like the Aperia route with the runic cards. So it really just depends from there on. But moving forward off of that too, I feel like cards like Nibiru, like Dark Ruler, are falling a bit more out of the format, especially with Rukalis now, and everyone being aware of like Gigantic as well. Dark Ruler also just doesn't really do a whole lot to the tier board. Do you think those are cards that you would still be worried about post Dabl, or there's just probably more niche situations?
So it's kind of interesting because it's kind of interesting, right? So if you're worried about cards like Nibiru, classically Dragon Link never really cared about Nibiru
True.
because you had the ability to go into your Papega ruler and use that to bait out the Nib because your opponent would have to drop Nib on you when you go Tracer Pop because they don't want you to mill 5 cards. That's no longer the case. So you're put in this kind of weird position as the Dragon player where you aren't able to bait your opponent into Nib very easily. So you have some lines that you can go for where you can go for Apollo to punish your opponent for holding Nib for too long. But you also can just not do that and just disrespect the Nib. And you kind of have to take a gamble on whether or not your opponent has it. And the part of the thing that makes it so hard is that previously you would, if you got nibbed, you would use Red MD to go into like a quad boral and recover off of nib. But now, if you want to push into a large board with Dragon Link, you have to kind of use that quad boral before you would get nibbed. So it makes nib kind of risky to play into sometimes. But as you were saying, not a lot of people are on nib right now. So you can kind of take advantage of the fact that people aren't playing nib and you can play really aggressively um, and just kind of disrespect it to some degree. But when it comes to, when you extend that far into a nib, you have to start thinking about cards like Dark Ruler, right? And that's where the Bystials really come into play and really make this deck so powerful and so cool. Is that now you're kind of splitting your board between the monsters and the spell traps. So even if they drop something like a Dark Ruler on you, you still have something like Branded Beast to where you have a essentially what's a Trident pop. You potentially have rebranded on your field to generate you extra advantage and to draw you cards. And seals can always still trigger underneath the Dark Ruler. It can't bounce, but it can still get you, a Magnamute from your deck or a Druid Worm from your deck. And when you combine that with something like Branded Beast, you still have multiple disruptions um, through something like a Dark Ruler. So Dark Ruler isn't as scary. I think really the scary thing is the uncertainty with Nib and just constantly having to, make the right call on whether or not your opponent has Nib, and sometimes that can backfire.
Do you think that it's more correct to run like 2 Heavenly Spheres then? If you get like Nibiru, then you can like summon the Red MD, summon back a monster, and just make another seal?
Um, I don't think so. Just because by the time that you're going to get Nibiru, you're going to be Dark Locked, and if your opponent's really patient with their Nibiru, you might be locked out of summoning Link 2 monsters altogether.
Gotcha.
So there is one really cool play that you can make if you do get Nibiru that I kind of like doing. So you can actually overextend right into this Nibiru,
Right.
but you might not have set up your full Bystial package at this point, right? Like maybe you've only gotten, your Lubellion and activated Branded Beast,
Sure.
but and you might not have gotten Saronir yet. What you can do is if you have that seals on the field floating and you get nibbed, you can actually go for your Saronir off of the seal trigger. And then depending on at what stage you got nibbed or what the situation is, you can either go for an IP Masquerena, or you can just use your Branded Beast to tribute off your Saronir and pop their nib on your turn and use that to set up your rebranded if you don't already have it. And that will, even if you're losing your board, you're still generating so much advantage off of the rebranded that if you don't get OTK'd on the follow up, you're going like +3 or +4.
Yeah, and that pure variant really does allow that too with all the hand traps that you can play. It's really nice.
Yeah. So you just have so much, especially if you already resolved a Magnitude on that turn, you're going to be able to have a Branded Beast pop. You're going to have a draw off of your Rebranded. You're going to have the ability to summon back a Magnamute now that you have the Rebranded. You have the potential of Druid Worm, which is a double pop. You just get so much immediately. And if you're able to make that IP Masquerena as well, especially if you resolved a Magnamute during your turn, you're going to be able to not only search a Bystial as a defensive card on your opponent's turn, but your opponent is most likely going to attempt to leave their main phase one immediately and use their nib to trade your IP Masquerena because they're afraid, of their monster getting spun back with Unicorn. And that's going to allow you to survive until the next turn.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple cards out there that will bait Nibiru 100%. That's actually like a really fun one, just to like end on that IP and force it. Because like some boards are just really weak against these simple bounces as well, so they are pretty effective. And like even Dragon alone, like the reason why I really like this deck too is I feel like even if you do get Nibiru, it just never feels like an L immediately, just because you do have Seal in the summon. It's still really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just having that inherent kind of protection against Nib is really nice. And the fact, too, that you can threaten Apollo really nicely in this deck as well can also confuse your opponent as to where to Nibiru you because, they might just say, oh, it's Dragon Link. They're not going to put up a Savage Dragon until late. I can hold this Nib. And then suddenly you summon an Apollo against them and they're like, oh, well, now what? And then you can make your Apollo, you can make Borland underneath it safely, you can make your Savage Dragon underneath that safely, and now you're, instead of ending on a Seals, you're ending on Apollo, Borland, and a Savage, which is really, really strong.
Yeah, another thing that I really like too, that even in tier I like to do with the Bystials is that you can go ahead and use Dark to summon back like the Magnemite from your opponent's graveyard, and then you search the Druid Worm, and if you're in like a really bad position, you can just make IP and pass. And so if they attempt to play, you can summon the Druid, and then if they attempt to like summon, you can just use IP, make the Unicorn, get a pop and a spin. It's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's really, really strong.
So, talking more about D Link now and where it's currently at, do you feel like it's more of a fishbowl since we haven't seen Chaotic Ruler anymore since it got banned, or do you feel like it's still a bit of fishbowl? You still got to see like what your hand is to know like what route you're gonna take.
So I think it's it's hard for me to say because just like everybody else, I'm having to adjust to this new version of Dragon Link. So I look at my hands and I don't always know exactly where they're going because the bestials change so much.
Right.
I think the deck is a lot more pathable now without something like Chaotic Ruler adding so much RNG into how your turn's going to play out. But there's definitely this element of um I don't know how I want to say this, but there's this element of you kind of just have to see where the hand takes you, especially with the Bystials now, because there's these hands that I'm finding a lot of the time where you might open something like the Safert and your Bestial package, and you might be using your babies, right?
Right.
Like if you're summoning like Collapse and Wyver, and sometimes it's correct for you to hold on to one of your babies and just not use it when you normally would, and instead use your Bestial as your extender to go into like a Romulus or whatever. And sometimes on those same exact hands, it's completely incorrect. And it really kind of depends on what the matchup is, what the rest of your hand looks like, and it's kind of hard because trying to create content for this deck, it's really hard to provide people with these nice and easy combos that you can follow and recreate because sometimes you have hands where you just introduce one card into the equation and suddenly everything that you're doing is completely different. Like I think one of the best examples of that is if you draw quick launch. Quick launch has almost always been a card in Dragon Link that disrupts the regular flow of how a turn might play out because it completely negates the need for you to summon Romulus. And not only that, too, if you do go into your Romulus, it generates different like pathing because you could go for your boot sector first and then pop the boot sector easily with the tracer by kind of sequence breaking the combo. So quick launch just changes a lot of things. And then you still are playing cards like Noctovision, which can completely alter the path of your hand because you might draw a card that completely changes how you want to play out your turn. And it's just stuff like that. I think it's one of those decks that you can't perfectly path out, but it's definitely something that you can learn, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's got to be just a little less fishbowl and probably a lot less linear then. So like the deck itself, even for myself when I was playing it back toward Nats, definitely a much different deck now. I know that the new rebranded and Beast definitely do help out a lot, but I can only imagine a lot of the hands are definitely a bit awkward, but they still get there, but just in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's actually kind of funny that you mention rebranded and Beast while we're just having this conversation, because one of the hardest things for me to figure out right now, and one of the things that I'm still as I'm testing and working on the deck, trying to figure out which it is do you keep rebranded or do you keep branded Beast in your deck when you go second? And there's some really interesting scenarios where both options are correct. Obviously, rebranded is a better card to draw if you're going second. It's more aggressive and it gives you those extra draws because you're probably going to be summoning Bystials, banishing stuff, and drawing cards. But Branded Beast has these really cool interactions where against like Trollament, for example, they might with the field spell their boss monsters like Lulu and Kaleido Heart go up to 35, which tie with your Borland. So you sometimes miss out on lethals if you don't have the branded beast in your deck. Because if you had the branded beast, you instead could go for like a Borland, activate your branded beast from deck, and you can tribute off a Bystial to pop their field spell to drop their monsters' attack points and use the Borland to clean up the board, and push for extra damage. And it's just one of those things where you just kind of have to. It's just one of those situational things that you almost can't prepare for sometimes.
Yeah, both those cards are very strong, and we do mention those a lot. But whenever we get new cards like this for the deck, it's almost like back when we get new cards like the Guard Dragons, right? And then we had a whole idea of how we played the deck, and then we got the Guard Dragons. We're like, wow, this changes the entire deck. And so now, like, we
Yeah.
get all these new cards, and we're like, all right, now how do we make these fit? So it's definitely interesting as far as like post side patterns as well. Definitely, of course, like you said, rebranded being that better card to draw when you're going second, but B still having a lot of versatility. Just having a Lubellion in general, it just seems so nice. It's just another one of the cards as a utility. Also, being able to dump it off the ravine is pretty cool too. Have you ever thought too potentially about if you were to play like just a couple tier elements to do like any kind of like fusion plays? I've heard people talk about it in Dragon. Anything you've ever thought of?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I was trying out at one point. I just don't think there's really space for it personally. I think you're already so tight on extra deck space. There's already like 20 cards I want to play in my extra.
That's
I
fair.
don't know how I'd be fitting fusions in there. I don't know how I'd be fitting, the Tyralliments into the main deck without, you know, um, putting too many cooks in the kitchen. But it's definitely cool. I think that stuff like Havness, I think, has potential more or less to go in any deck, because if you think about it, Havness is just like three upstart goblins. When you go second, so there's always an argument that you can put those cards into any deck, but uh, personally, I don't see them in Dragonlink functioning too very well.
Especially with like Destrudo. Probably pretty okay.
Yeah,
The other thing that I
yeah,
saw too was like in Sprite right now, they're running one instant fusion, one kit, one Merly for like the mill 8. So like you could essentially just mill like you were doing chaotic early, you just don't get the ad. So it's just like a very minimal engine to be playing, and at that point it's kind of like would you run it or would you not? But it's still like a cool idea.
yeah.
So looking more so at like the boot sector launch in the deck now and the importance of this. Before we had a lot more combo pieces, and if you got impermed on like your striker dragon, it didn't hurt that bad. It was relatively okay. You still really want to get access to your boot sector. Do you feel like boot sector is more important now or less important?
It's about the same. The way I look at boot sector is that if striker dragon, it's kind of like a garnet in your deck that just has that applies an effect to another card. So what boot sector to me says is that if striker dragon resolves for the rest of this turn, all rocket monsters in your hand have the condition that they can special summon themselves. So to me, boot sector is just one of those cards that's like, well, it's there, it lets you summon out extra monsters, so your rockets are all technically extenders. I don't think it's ever really necessary for your combo. Like if you get hit on the striker dragon, it's about the same as before. All of your options are about exactly the same as to how you would progress your turn. And I think, kind of maybe coming full circle to what I was saying before, where if you're playing the pure version of Dragon Link, one of your better options might just be to go Seal Pass on turn one and to back that up with all the defensive cards that this deck can run. So your opponent's kind of just hand looping themselves for one if they hit your Striker Dragon a lot of the time. That's just how I've always thought about it.
Again, especially if you had that rebranded, just being able to get back the striker anyway. So it's pretty solid. It's pretty good.
Oh yeah, of course. But I say this, but now that I say this, I have to knock on wood, because the second that I come with this approach, there's always those hands where it's like you draw Rocket Synchron Recharger, and that's your only play, like Rocket Synchron Recharger and 3 defensives.
Yeah.
You normal the Synchron, you make the striker, they imperm you, and it's like, oh dang, the one time where this actually just stops me from playing the game completely.
Yeah, it's always been an interesting point of interruption. Talking more so about like how the deck looks right now, do you know of any really cool tech cards the deck's playing at the moment, or anything that's like really nice for upcoming tourneys?
Yeah, so there's a few cards that are finding their way into Dragon Link that haven't been seen in a little while. I think one of which is this isn't so much of a tech card, but more of just like a new piece of the engine, is the Heretic King of a Tomb. This card is seeing a lot of play again. This card hasn't seen play in Dragon Link in honestly like forever. I think like the Dragoonity version played it, and outside of that, none of the other main variants played it. But it just being a generic rank 6 monster that can teleport any dragon out of your deck is really, really strong. Another extra deck piece that's seeing play again that didn't before is Delindrous Dragon. Delindrous is really, really nice because when you combine it with something like Quad Boral, you're able to make a Boral End plus Savage off of just 2 dragons, which is really, really nice. So it kind of gives you that ability to make a powerful end board again with little investment. Other cards that are kind of coming in are cards like the former prize card, the Chaos Emperor Dragon. That one actually is really solid now, where it might not have been before, because of the Bystials banishing your own cards like on the first turn if you have to use them to play the game. I think the Chaos Emperor gets a lot better now, being able to um, add cards back. I think one of the best examples of this is when you open Lubellion plus Seifert. One of the best plays that you have is to go Seifert into or the best plays. One of the best plays you have is to go Lubellion for Saronir, summon your Seifert, pitch that Saronir, and then search Magnamut. The Saronir can then send the rebranded to the graveyard. And, normally you will just go like special the Magnamut, you get your search in the end phase, you summon back your Lubellion, you maybe go for like Seals or Romulus. But if you add the Chaos Emperor into the mix, you can now add back that banished Saronir that you banished off of the Magnamut. You can then summon that Saronir, and suddenly you have your Tomb. And now your whole deck is just cracked wide open, because instead of having to just go for Seal, you can go for a Tomb, which is basically an LP. you can special out Absol from your deck, use that to tribute off for your Lubellion, and not only will you get your Lubellion into play, which gets your Branded Beast into play, but you trigger your Absol to search your Tracer, and you don't have to actually use your Dragon Ravine. So you could even skip the step of going for Romulus entirely, and that opens up a lot of pathing for the deck because you're getting to skip an extra material usage. It's reducing the amount of material that you need to make your board by effectively by one, which is really, really strong for the deck. And I think those are some of my favorite cards that are just, seeing play in the deck again, which is really cool. They're really fun to play with, really cool tools.
No, absolutely. That's a really cool play around, especially with the fact that Ravine does cost that discard. So being able to do anything to get around that is always going to be really strong too. Looking more at your deck list now, is there a couple things you want to talk about as far as like your hand trap lineup, as far as even like the extra or any other tech cards you're playing in the list as of right now?
Yeah, so this list is pretty standard. I think there's still stuff to work on with it. With the defensive cards that are in this list are more or less just filler. I think they could be any 9 defensive cards, whichever 9 you think are best. And I think it's that this deck is really nice because it has those 9 free slots for you to fill with whatever defensives you want. And what's really cool about this deck is that in matchups where your opponent loses to DD Crow, like Terralment, you actually kind of get to double the number of defensive cards that you're playing in that matchup because all of your Bistids are suddenly not Engine anymore, but now they're also defensive cards, which makes this deck really, really solid. Um, yeah, I think this deck is just a really solid starting point for anybody who wants to pick up Dragon Link and test it, maybe play it at Minneapolis. I think if you just look at the side deck, a cool card to talk about is Eradicator, which is a card that sees a lot of play in the current format of Yu-Gi-Oh! Just to begin with. But a neat interaction is that all the Bystials are Eradicator targets. So you
Crazy.
actually it's really, really nice because previously, if you wanted to play Eradicator and Dragon Link, what you had to do was you had to kind of sometimes you would want to use your Chaotic Ruler as a way to make a piece of your board. So like you might use it to summon an IP Masquerena or something. Um, but like more commonly you would just want to leave your Chaotic Ruler in the graveyard uh in previous formats because that would be your lethal push on the following turn. It didn't matter if your opponent fully broke your board because all you had to do was just make an access code talker on the follow-up and then summon your Pepega back from the grave, and that was 8300. But if you wanted to play Eradicator, you had to summon that Pepega back and tribute it off to use the Eradicator. But now the fact that your defensive cards, your Bystials, that you're already searching with Magnamut, you're already passing on, these cards trigger your Eradicator, and you don't have to put them on the board. You can keep them in your hand is really, really strong. And especially with cards like Druid Worm, the one that you're probably going to be searching the most often, um, the fact that it also gets to pop a card if it's sent from field to graveyard, you can hold that Eradicator until your opponent puts a monster on the field, and then you can summon your Druid Worm, banish a card out of their graveyard, and then Eradicator tribute it off, and then destroy all of their spell cards as well as pop a monster, which is just so crazy.
Druid's so nice.
It really is.
It's like my favorite. You go like IP with it, you can drop with it. Like there's so many things you can do that are just like so crazy with that card.
Yeah, I think just while we're on the topic of Druid Worm too, one thing that I'll mention about this list that is a little bit different than the lists that I've shared previously publicly is that this list that I sent you isn't playing Apollo, and I've recently cut the Apollo for Baronne de Fleur, and this is something that I've kind of had mixed feelings on. So I don't think that in Dragons it's good to make Baronne on turn 1 most of the time.
Sure.
Uh, because you have to invest both a Bystial and a Tracer without using your Tracer pop to make this Baronne. So that's 2 cards for 1 negate. That's Doesn't seem that great. However, Barone is insanely good when you go second if you combo it with Druid Worm. So if you summon your Druid Worm's probably disrupting your opponent on their turn, so it's already getting value for being a DD Crow.
Right.
It's sticking to the board because your opponent's not going to want to remove a Druid Worm because it's going to pop something.
True.
So they're not going to want to get rid of it off your board. So it's going to stick. And then all you have to do is normal summon a Tracer, make Barone, and now Druid Worm's going to get to pop a card. Barone gets to pop a card, and then Barone gets to negate a card on top of that. So for just Druid Worm plus Tracer, you're dealing with 4 cards from your opponent, which is just crazy, crazy good value.
Yeah, on top of if you're like hand trapping them too during your turn, so it's or during their turn rather, but it's pretty good.
Oh my gosh, that's just getting into bullying territory at that point.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. Also, like with Imperm, do you ever feel like Imperm and the Bystials conflict?
Sometimes you can feel that way. I think, but the thing is that the matchup where it would probably conflict the most is a matchup like Tier, right?
Right.
You know that the first fusion that they're going to make is their Kit Close. Yeah. So you can always hold that Imperm, if you draw them together, let them make their Kit Close, Imperm that Kit, and then just Bystial the next fusion summon. That's always something that you have that option for. So I don't think it conflicts too much just because in the situations where it would conflict, you kind of have this natural flow of priorities where they just kind of line up to where you're going to want to use that Imperm first anyway.
Yeah, that's a huge difference between Chaotic Ruler and now, because like back when it was Chaotic Ruler, you just play Valier because it was searchable. But now Imperm's just always been the better one in my opinion. So being able to play Imperm now over the Valier because it's like not as great is definitely going to be a huge plus. And Imperm on Kit is just so detrimental most times. That card is so good. So that's definitely one thing that I could see happening that'd be really efficient. And like you said, hitting that second or third name is usually just more impactful here.
Yeah, and another cool thing about the Imperm that's worth mentioning and is something that kind of comes up more, like where my kind of love for this interaction came up more is actually from Master Duel, where I've recently been playing a lot of Dragon Link, is that even though you still have Chaotic Ruler in Master Duel, you actually still choose to play Imperm over Valor. And the reason for that is because of the mirror match. So there's this really neat thing in Dragon Link where you can't out your own boss monster. So in the mirror match, if you find yourself staring down an opposing Borderlands, the only out in your entire deck other than a card like Imperm would be Heretic Seal. But if your opponent understands how player priority works, that's never going to work. So you need to play a card like Imperm in order to out something like your own boss monster in a mirror match, or if randomly it gets stolen with a Dark Charmer or something, right. You need to be able to clear your own boss monster. So it has just this extra hidden utility in that matchup, which is just really nice. Which is just another reason why I don't think we'd ever return to playing Valor.
Yeah, especially right now, Valor is just like so not great. It's just like so many things dodge it feels like, and this just never really feels good. Also, like there's also just like tactics is randomly here and there in formats, and the more you can play around that, the better.
Oh, 100%.
Well, I do want to thank you for joining me today. I know this is a bit of a longer one, but it's definitely really great discussion. And I hope that a lot of people who are looking to play Dragon do go and look at his channel, do go and look at his Metafy link, because of the fact that there's a lot of more great knowledge to know from Mike. Any final thoughts on the video today?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just said perfectly summarizes all of it. I want to thank you for having me on. For anybody who is interested in Dragonlink content, I do stream on Twitch almost every day. Recently, it's just been almost every single day, and we have very long streams of almost nothing but Dragonlink content. So very, very great place to learn about Dragonlink if you're really just interested in seeing someone play through the deck. But if that's not your thing, as you mentioned, I do have my YouTube channel where I post more condensed versions of Dragon Link theory, Dragon Link replays, and as always, there's Meta 5 for people who I think learn best through a one-on-one approach. I know that that's how it is for me. I need that one-on-one kind of setting to really learn. So, I just want to provide that for the community and hopefully teach some people how to play Dragon Link.
Best deck, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Dragon's best deck forever. 4 years, baby. Let's
Yeah,
go.
it just won't die. That's so
Uh,
funny.
yeah, they need to hit like 20 cards for this deck to die. It's probably the best investment I've ever made in this game.
But again, thank you so much, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful night.